What's up, you freaking geniuses? So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to convert a function from standard form to vertex form. And I'm also going to teach you how to find the vertex and x-intercepts of the parabola, or the quadratic function, all right? So here is the standard form of a quadratic function. It's just f of x is equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are just your coefficients, just numbers, all right? And then here's the vertex form of a quadratic. So it's f of x is equal to a times x minus h squared plus k, where h and k are the x and y coordinates of the vertex, right? So that's why it's kind of convenient to turn a function from standard form to vertex form, because it's easy to see what the vertex is. Okay, so here's the first example we're going to go over. We have f of x is equal to x squared minus 6x. Okay, so the first thing you want to do with these problems is just make sure that your leading coefficient right here that's next to the x squared is a 1. So if there's some other number here, you always have to factor that out. Or if there's just a negative sign, you have to factor it out. So here we obviously don't have a number next to x squared, so that means we can go on to the next step, which is completing the square. And the way that you do that is by using this little formula right here. So b over 2 squared, okay? Now, where is this b coming from? Well, if we look at our standard form again, b is just this number right here, this coefficient that's next to the x. So in our problem, the coefficient that's next to the x would just be this one right here, this -6. Okay, so let's plug in a -6 right here for b. So then this is going to be equal to -6 over 2 squared. -6 divided by 2 is equal to -3. So here we get -3 squared, which is equal to +9. Okay, so this number right here that we just found, we are going to add it. And remember, what you do to one side of an equation, you do to the other, right? So that's why we have to add a 9 on this side. So on the left side, I'll just rearrange these. We're going to have f of x plus 9 is equal to, and then here, now that we completed the square, now we have to factor this. So here we can split this up into two sets of parentheses, right? So x squared we can split up into x times x. And then for these two numbers, we need two numbers that multiply to +9, but they add up to -6. So in this case, that would be a -3 and a -3, right? -3 times -3 is +9, and -3 minus 3 is equal to -6. So here we're going to have f of x plus 9 is equal to, and then here, x minus 3 times x minus 3 is the exact same thing as x minus 3 squared. Great, so you can see we almost have our vertex form. The last thing we have to do is get rid of this 9 and move it back to this side. So here, let's subtract 9 from both sides. On this side, they cancel out. So then we end up with f of x is equal to x minus 3 squared minus 9. All right, great. So now you can see we finally have it in vertex form. So now we can identify the vertex, right? So let's just write that over here. So what is the vertex? Well, again, it's going to be these two numbers, h and k. So here it's going to be -3 and -9. The only thing is, with this number that's inside of the parentheses, you always change the sign. So for the vertex, instead of having a -3, it's going to be a +3. And then this number stays the same, so that's just going to be -9. All right, so then the vertex for this function is at 3, -9. All right, now lastly, let's just find the x-intercepts. So the way that you do that is you just start with your original function here, okay? And all you do is you set your function equal to 0. Okay, so we're going to plug in a 0 for f of x. So we're going to say 0 is equal to x squared minus 6x. Okay, so here we're trying to solve for x. So one thing we can do is actually factor out an x from both of these terms, right? So we're going to get 0 is equal to x. And then in parentheses, we're going to be left with x minus 6. All right, so now that we've factored this down as much as we can, now you can see that we have two factors, right? So we have this x and this x minus 6. So all you have to do is set each of your factors equal to 0. So the first factor, x, we'll set that equal to 0. And our other factor, x minus 6, we'll also set that equal to 0. Okay, so then solving for x on this side, well, there's nothing to solve for, right? We already have our solution. It's simply x is equal to 0. And then over here, solving for x, we can get rid of this -6 by adding 6 to both sides. So then here we get that x is equal to +6. All right, so then these are our two x-intercepts, 0 and +6. So this just means that the parabola hits the x-axis at 0 and at +6. Alrighty, here is the next example. So now we have f of x is equal to -x² plus 6x minus 8. All right, so like we said, we always want to, the first thing we want to check is to make sure there's nothing next to our x² right here, right? It has to be just simply a +1. So here we have a negative symbol, so that basically means there's a -1 right here, which is no good, okay? So the first thing that we have to do to this problem is factor out this negative sign. All right, so here we're going to get that f of x is equal to, and then factoring this out, this negative sign, and we're going to have in parentheses x², positive x² this time, and then this positive 6x is going to turn into -6x, and then here we're actually going to close the parentheses, okay? We're not going to factor out a negative sign from our last coefficient right there, so that's going to stay as -8. Now, the reason we're only doing the first two terms here is because we're trying to write this in vertex form, right? So here you can see we have only two terms in these parentheses, right? So that's why we're only using two terms in our parentheses. Okay, so now that we factored that out, you can see this x² is just a regular x², right? There's nothing next to it. So now we can start to complete the square. So again, the formula is just b over 2 squared. All right, so then in this problem, what is our b term? It's this one right here, -6, kind of like the last problem. Well, exactly like the last problem, right? So -6 over 2, I'm losing track of these colors, squared. All right, so then here, -6 divided by 2, again, is -3. And that's squared, and -3 squared, again, is +9. Okay, now we have to be a little careful with where we place this 9 in our function, okay? So remember this, where did this 9 come from? Well, it came from this formula right here, right? B over 2. And so where was b? Where'd the b come from? Well, the b is this number right here that's inside of these parentheses, okay? So since this number that we got to complete the square came from inside these set of parentheses, we have to put this number inside these sets of parentheses, all right? So here we're going to get f of x is equal to negative, and then in parentheses, x² minus 6x plus 9. All right, then we'll close our parentheses, and then we still have this -8 over here. Okay, now remember, whatever we add to one side of our equation, we have to add to the other side, right? So here we have a +9, so here we're going to say +9, and in this case, this 9, it's not going to be just positive, it's actually going to be a -9. All right, now, where the hell is this negative symbol coming from? Well, it's coming from this negative symbol that we factored out. Okay, so as you can see, this negative symbol, we're distributing it into every factor that's inside of these parentheses, right? So here, this is really -x², this is really +6x, so that means this one is actually -9. Okay, so that's why we have to make sure this one on this side is a -9. Okay, and that's always going to be the case whenever you factor something out at the beginning. So in this case, we factored out a negative sign, right, or -1. So when we bring something over to the other side, we need to make sure we attach whatever we factored out. Okay, if we had factored out a -2, well then over here we would be saying -2 times 9, okay? If we factored out a +5, well then over here we would be saying 5 times 9. Okay, so now we can finally keep going here. So let's simplify this one more time. So we have f of x, and then here, this is -9 now, right? So we have -9 is equal to negative, right? And then here, this trinomial, x² minus 6x plus 9, we can actually factor this, right? And if you remember, this is the exact same trinomial we had in the first problem. So we know that this trinomial breaks down into x minus 3 times x minus 3, okay? Or in other words, we can write that as simply x minus 3 squared, okay? And then here we have this -8, right? So then we have -8. Okay, great. So now you can see we're really close to having this in vertex form. The last thing we have to do is move the number over to this side so we can isolate f of x, right? So we'll have f of x is equal to, and then here we'll add 9 to both sides, right? Those cancel out. So then this is going to be equal to negative x minus 3 squared, looks like plus 1, right? Plus 1. Okay, so now that we have it in vertex form, now let's identify the vertex. So the vertex in this case is going to be from these two numbers again. So here the vertex is going to be +3, +1, right? +3, +1. And also one thing that I forgot to point out in the first problem is this number right here, a, tells us which way the parabola opens. So if this number right here is positive, your parabola opens up. And if this number here is negative, it opens down, okay? So here we have essentially a -1. So that means that this parabola, this function, would open down, okay? Now lastly, let's just find the x-intercepts. And in order to do that, again, all we have to do is set f of x equal to 0, all right? So here we're gonna have 0 is equal to -x squared plus 6x minus 8. So we get that 0 is equal to, and then here we can factor out a negative sign from all of these. So we'll get negative, and then in parentheses, x squared minus 6x and plus 8 at the end this time. So then here this is going to be 0 is equal to negative, and then we can split this up into two sets of parentheses. So x squared we can break down into x times x. And here we need two numbers that multiply to +8, but add up to -6. So that would be -2 and -4, right? Because -2 times -4 is +8, and -2 minus 4 is equal to -6. All right, great. So now that we factored this down as much as we possibly can, you can see we have two factors, right? X minus 2 and x minus 4. So let's set each of those. So x minus 2 equal to 0 and x minus 4 equal to 0, right? So then this first one, we can add 2 to both sides. So we get that x is equal to +2. And then on this side, we can add 4 to both sides. So then here we get that x is equal to +4, all right? So here are our x-intercepts at +2 and +4. So if you found the video helpful, make sure to leave a thumbs up down below. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below.